Let's dive deep today. We're tackling consciousness.
Ooh, one of the big mysteries out there.
It really is.
Yep.
We'll be exploring Robert Lawrence Kuhn's paper.
A landscape of consciousness.
Exactly. He brings in so many different theories of consciousness. It's really a who's who.
Yeah, a lot of different viewpoints.
So it's going to be a dense jungle of ideas. Think of us as your guides through it.
I like that, a guide through the jungle. Kuhn did a really fantastic job bringing all these different perspectives together.
Yeah, for sure. So how about, before we even get lost in this jungle, we start with some basics. I mean, we all know what it means to be conscious, like being awake versus being asleep.
Right.
But what are we really talking about when we say consciousness?
Yeah, you hit a key point. Consciousness. It's a word we use in a lot of different ways.
Right.
So, for example, we can talk about the level of consciousness of an animal. Is it awake? Is it aware of its surroundings? But the real heart of the matter, the real puzzle, is what philosophers call phenomenal consciousness.
Okay. Phenomenal consciousness. I'm all ears.
Think of it as that subjective experience, the quality of our mental states. It's that what it feels like to see a vibrant color or hear your favorite song or feel joy or sadness. It's the raw feel of experience.
I get it. It's like, how do you explain the taste of chocolate to somebody who's never tasted it before?
Yeah.
You can describe it, but you can't really give them the experience.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so difficult to study. It's inherently subjective. I mean, we can look at brain activity.
Right.
But how do we explain that subjective feeling, that qualia?
Yeah. There's like an explanatory gap, right, between what's physically going on in the brain and the subjective experience.
Precisely. And Kuhn actually quotes the philosopher Patricia Churchland, and she just puts it perfectly. She says, out of meat, how do you get thought?
The central mystery, right?
Yeah.
How do we get from neurons firing to the feeling of awareness?
Yes, exactly.
So how does Kuhn approach this mysterious landscape?
Well, he presents us with a whole spectrum of theories. He calls it, as we said, a landscape of consciousness, ranging from theories that say, hey, listen, consciousness is totally explainable by physical processes in the brain, all the way to theories that say, no, consciousness is something much more fundamental.
Okay, so lead the way. What's the first stop on this tour of theories?
Well, let's start at the most, maybe scientific end of the spectrum. Materialism.
Materialism. Okay, so this is the idea that the brain is essentially a machine.
Right.
And consciousness is just a byproduct of its workings.
Yeah, exactly. Thinkers like John Searle, for instance, would say that consciousness is a system feature of the brain. So just like digestion is a feature of the digestive system, consciousness is a feature of a sufficiently complex brain.
It's a pretty straightforward view, but doesn't it run into trouble explaining that leap from the physical to the subjective?
Right. The feeling of what it's like.
Yeah, what it's like to experience something.
You're right. That's the big challenge for materialism. How do you account for qualia? Now, some materialists, like David Papineau, he suggests that this hard problem of consciousness, it's a pseudo-problem.
Okay.
He basically says that consciousness is simply what brain processes feel like from the inside.
So it's not really a mystery. We just think it's a mystery because we're looking at it the wrong way.
That's essentially his argument. But you also have other materialists who acknowledge the difficulty of explaining qualia. Owen Flanagan, for example, he sees the brain as a Darwin machine, shaped by evolution to help us survive.
Okay.
And he's pretty skeptical of introspection, of looking inward.
Yeah.
He thinks that our subjective reports about our conscious experience might not be reliable.
Interesting. So we've got Searle saying that consciousness just kind of pops up when you have a complex enough brain, and then Papineau saying there's not even a real mystery to solve. But then Flanagan comes in and says, well, maybe we can't even trust our own introspection.
Exactly.
That's a lot of different perspectives, even within materialism.
Absolutely. And it just shows how complex this debate is, Even within one framework, there are so many different interpretations and disagreements about how to approach consciousness. But the one thing that all materialist theories share is that basic assumption that consciousness arises from physical processes in the brain.
Okay, so it all comes down to matter, how it's organized.
Right.
But what if there's more to the story than just neurons firing? What if it's not just a byproduct?
That's a great question. And that leads us to a different set of theories that look at the brain as an information processor. That's where things get even more interesting. Instead of focusing on just the physical stuff, these theories ask, what if consciousness is about how information is processed?
Okay, consciousness is information processing. So like the brain is running some kind of super sophisticated software.
Yeah, that's the basic idea. And one of the leading theories here is global workspace theory.
Okay.
So imagine the brain as a massive network of all these specialized processors, right? They're all working on different tasks. And consciousness, in this view, it's like a global workspace or like a spotlight that shines on a particular piece of information and that makes it available to the whole system.
So only the stuff in the spotlight, that's what we're consciously aware of at any given time.
Exactly. And it's a really elegant way to explain why our conscious awareness is limited.
Right. We can't focus on everything at once.
Yeah, exactly. We can only focus on so much at once. And then there's another really influential theory, integrated information theory.
IIT.
IIT. Okay. What's the main idea there?
Well, it focuses on the amount of integrated information in a system. Basically, the more interconnected and interdependent the information is, the higher the level of consciousness. So think of it like this. A simple system, like a light switch, it has very low integrated information. It's on or off, right?
Right.
But a complex system, like the human brain, it has this huge network of interconnected parts, constantly exchanging information, influencing each other. So more complex web of information equals more consciousness. So does that mean a computer could be conscious if it had enough integrated information?
That's one of the really big questions that IIT raises, and it has some pretty profound implications. Because if consciousness is just about information processing, then in theory, any system, even if it's made of silicon instead of neurons, if it can achieve a high enough level of integrated information, it could be conscious.
That's a pretty radical thought. It challenges our whole idea of what it means to be conscious.
Absolutely. And it leads us to another fascinating group of theories that emphasize the role of the body and our interaction with the world.
Okay, so not just the brain in a vat, but the whole embodied being out there in the world.
Precisely. Embodied and enactive theories say that consciousness isn't just something that happens inside our heads. It's deeply intertwined with our physical being, our senses, our actions, our engagement with the world.
It makes me think of that quote by Alva Noe that Kuhn mentions. He says, "We spend all our lives not as free-floating brains. We're embodied. We're environmentally embedded. We're socially nurtured."
Yes, exactly. Noe's point is that we can't understand consciousness just by looking at the brain in isolation. We have to look at the whole system.
The whole system.
The brain, the body, and the environment all interacting.
It's like you can't understand how a car works just by looking at the engine, right?
Exactly.
You got to see the whole car in action, how the engine interacts with the transmission, the wheels, the road.
That's a great analogy. And it highlights a key question that these theories raise, which is, could a disembodied brain in a vat ever be truly conscious?
That's a deep thought.
Right. If consciousness depends on this interaction with the world, then a brain cut off from its body, cut off from the environment, it might not be capable of the same kind of experience that we have.
Wow. Makes you wonder if you can even separate the mind from the body.
Right.
If it's all one big interconnected system.
That's the question, isn't it? Philosophers have been debating that for centuries.
For centuries.
And these embodied theories really push us to consider that the mind might not be as separate from the body as we tend to assume.
Okay, so we've gone from the brain as a machine to the brain as an information processor, and now to this idea of consciousness being intertwined with our embodiment, with our interaction with the world. What happens when we go even further, like beyond the physical altogether?
You're ready to venture into the more radical territory of dualism and idealism?
Lead the way. I'm ready for some more mind-bending ideas.
Yeah.
All right, let's open that drawer. What's in there?
Well, one of the things you'll find is quantum theories of consciousness. These theories say that quantum processes in the brain, they might be really important for how conscious experience happens.
Okay, quantum theories. I've heard a little about this. It's a pretty controversial idea, isn't it?
It is. Mainstream science, they're still pretty skeptical about whether quantum effects really matter for consciousness.
Right.
But you have researchers like Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff, for example. They argue that there are these structures inside neurons called microtubules.
Okay.
And they think those could be the places where these quantum processes happen, giving rise to consciousness.
So it's not just neurons firing, but like quantum stuff happening inside the neurons themselves.
Yeah, exactly. It's a wild idea, but it's definitely gained some traction.
It has, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, what else is in that drawer?
Well, we've got parapsychology. That's the study of things like ESP, telepathy, near-death experiences.
Okay, now we're getting into some really fringe territory.
They are. But it's interesting stuff. Some researchers in parapsychology, like Dean Radin or Charles Tart, they suggest that these paranormal phenomena, if they're real, they might show that consciousness isn't totally limited to the brain and the body.
So consciousness could extend beyond our physical limits.
Right, like near-death experiences where people report out-of-body experiences, seeing a bright light, things like that.
Yeah.
These are often seen as maybe hints that consciousness could survive after death. Of course, these experiences are very subjective.
Right.
Hard to study scientifically.
Yeah, definitely a fascinating area. Okay, so we've covered a huge range of theories here.
Yeah,
From neuroscience to the paranormal.
we have.
But what does it all mean? How does thinking about consciousness in all these different ways, how does it change how we see ourselves and the world?
That's the key question. And Kuhn doesn't just give us all these theories and then leave us hanging.
Right.
He really digs into the implications for things like artificial intelligence, even the possibility of life after death.
Okay, let's start with AI. Does the possibility of creating conscious machines, does that depend on which theory of consciousness you believe in?
It absolutely does. If you're a materialist, if you think consciousness is just about information processing, then it seems like creating a conscious AI, it's just a matter of time.
Okay.
Just build a complex enough computer, and there you go, consciousness.
But what if consciousness is more than just computation? What if it needs something else that we can't replicate in a machine?
Then things become a lot less clear. If consciousness depends on having a body, on interacting with the world, on something really fundamental that we don't even understand yet, then maybe we can't create a truly conscious machine.
Yeah, it's like trying to catch lightning in a bottle. You can study it, you can try to recreate it, but maybe there's just something about its essence that you can't quite grasp.
Right, exactly.
Okay, what about virtual immortality? That idea that you could upload your consciousness to a computer and live forever.
That also depends on your view of consciousness. If it's all about information, then maybe you could transfer it. But if it's tied to your physical body, to your history, your experiences, then it's not so simple.
Right. It makes you wonder if a digital copy, even a perfect one, could ever really capture who you are.
That's the question.
And then there's the biggest question of all.
Yeah.
What happens to consciousness after death?
Yeah, the ultimate mystery. Kuhn admits science doesn't have a definite answer here.
Right.
But he points out that some theories, like dualism, certain types of idealism, they fit better with the idea of consciousness surviving.
Okay.
Of course, other theories, like materialism, say that it just ends when the brain stops.
So we've come to the end of our deep dive. What do we take away from all of this?
Well, I think the main takeaway is that there is no one right answer when it comes to consciousness. It's a mystery, and it's a mystery that should challenge us and inspire us. Exploring these different theories, even the really out there ones, it helps us appreciate just how deep this mystery is, and it makes us question our assumptions about reality.
I like that. It's not about finding the answer. It's about embracing the mystery, the wonder, all the possibilities. And, Kuhn actually brings up this really interesting idea from the physicist Lee Smolin.
Oh, yeah.
Smolin suggests that our unique perspectives on events, our individual experiences, those might be the physical link to consciousness.
Wow, that's a powerful idea.
It really is. Our unique ways of seeing the world, they might actually be shaping the universe.
That's a beautiful thought.
So to all of you listening out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep diving deep into this mystery of consciousness.
Yeah, keep driving deep.
You never know what amazing things you might find along the way.